Hey everyone, and welcome back to yet another fantastic episode of RPM Red Peace Machine, where our hosts are Roy Woody, Roy Casagranda, Benefsha Madinejad, and Ramesh Nadine, and me. I'm Susie Sheeler, and we are coming at you live, but you'll be watching it on tape. So let's go around and check everybody out. Ramesh, how are you doing today? What's going on?
Doing well, just, made a little bit of breakfast, fought the birds over it. They were very interested in the tomatoes that they can't have. Yeah, doing well.
Well, that's great. And what about you, Mr. Woody?
Me doing well. Yeah, good week. Most exciting thing that happened to me was my son finally found my wallet that I knew he hid, and he said he didn't. My 5 year old. So
Nice,
doing
nice.
well. After I
And
canceled all my cards.
Vanessa, how are you today?
Doing good. I was telling everybody I had a tea, a jasmine green tea, 2 p.m. yesterday, and it kept me up most of the night. Yeah, and then when I did sleep, I was dreaming of the Italian, being stuck with the Italian mob and hits and this. It was just not. Yeah, it was special. Yeah.
Wow.
What about you, Roy? Did you have trouble sleeping or were you out?
No, I slept really well because as a person who's part Italian, I was in Benefsha's dream causing nightmares.
Mm. No, you were with me.
Oh,
And we were in
Oh, you were being
Morocco.
attacked. Oh,
Yeah, it was one of those dreams. We were in
Ooh.
Morocco, but with the beautiful tiles in the room and
wow.
speaking of Morocco, segue,
Speaking of,
Pompeo, an Italian American, just made it so the United States now recognizes that Morocco owns Western Sahara.
Mm.
oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So now it'll be difficult to undo that, right? Because once you do that, how do you undo
have,
that?
have you heard about all the rumors that the executive orders are going to come down? Like the first one of the first ones is going to allow like legalize all the illegal immigrants here. Illegal
Oh,
immigrants.
didn't hear
I,
that.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know
like
how you would have
The
the
undocumented.
authority to do
Reagan
that
did it.
without some kind of law being passed by Congress, but you could
I mean, they
certainly
could veto it.
reinstitute DACA, right? Like
Right.
you could go back to where we were. You could undo all of Trump's executive orders, which is I think what you'll do on the first one is the first executive order will be delete all of Trump's executive orders.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Especially with what I mean, the hate that we're seeing at the at the Capitol and all of it's so sad to see these blockades and all of these military people keeping us away from the people's house. It is so sad to me. You can't even walk by Pennsylvania Avenue right now. They've got these barricades up and you have to stand way on the other side of it. It's so sad.
Well, I mean, I think this is a dangerous precedent, right? You don't want to have this kind of situation ever happen in a republic because it literally what happens the next time there's a peaceful protest in front of the
Well,
Capitol?
I think that's what they're doing,
Will
though.
there
They're
be one?
actually putting a permanent barricade around. That's what I heard they're doing. But did we
Yep.
finish with the check-ins? Susie, did
Yes.
you go?
Oh, I'm fine. Um, but I did because we're talking about this. We are talking about a republic and how we started, and we're a democratic republic, and so we have Democrats and Republicans. We used to have a Democrat Republican Party. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then they split, but they split. Were now we look back and we say Republicans were pro civil rights. What's going on, right? So, and then the Democrats flipped too. And I'm wondering how that happened. I mean, why did conservative white Southern Democrats become Republicans?
Okay, so one of the fun myths in the United States is that
Let me tell you a story.
let me tell you a story. So let me tell you a story. And one of the fun myths in the United
Thank you,
States is
Vanessa.
that there was a flip. It's not that the two parties flipped positions. It's not that the Republican Party was ever the People's Party and the Democratic Party was the bad guy and they became the good guy. It's much more complicated than that. So first of all, the Democratic Republican Party is the second party in the United States. The Federalist Party was first. The Democratic Republican Party ended up so powerful. The reason they were called that was they believed in republic, but their goal was to expand the amount of power that the public had. So they were going to make our republic more democratic. In other words, the name told you exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to create a republic that had a strong democratic tendency. And the reason that Jefferson and Madison wanted to create a party like that was they believed that Madison's Constitution, the one that was put into place in 1789, gave too much authority to the rich, and the only way to and the rich were corrupt, and they only cared about themselves, and they made awful decisions, and the only way to counterbalance that was to give the middle class and the lower class more authority, so that they could their interests would then compete against the interests of the rich, and they were hoping it would kind of flatten things out a little bit, and the United States would be better served that way. Andrew Jackson decided he was going to punish the Democratic Republican Party when he became president, because even though he was a Democratic Republican, they had sided with John Quincy Adams in the previous election and cheated and stole his first election. Jackson won 3 elections, but he only served as president for his second and third victories. John Quincy Adams didn't just lose the popular vote in that first election, he also lost the Electoral College. Like, it was over the top, crazy cheating.
How did that happen without some kind of
the Constitution's rule for how we elected the president was poorly written because they didn't think it through. And the Congress decided to use that as a loophole to take out Andrew Jackson, because they were worried about having he wasn't a commoner, but he was upper middle class. You know what I mean? Like, he was a slave owner, he had money, but he wasn't from the noble class. He wasn't an aristocrat. And they didn't want him. What?
New money.
He was new money, and they didn't want that guy. He wore a trench coat, and he didn't wear a wig, and he had a sidearm on his hip. You know, he looked like a more normal person would have looked as we were genociding the Native Americans and doing slavery. So he punished the Democratic Republican Party by dumping Republican and made it the Democratic Party. In other words, the Democratic Party is the Democratic Republican Party, just renamed. And his explicit goal was to make the United States an actual democracy. And that's why he changed the name. And the first thing he did was he got rid of the Electoral College in the 1832 election. We actually have had one non-electoral college election for president, and then we put it right back into place for 1836.
Was that the Baker v. Carr, or was that later?
Oh, that was Baker v. Carr was 1962, so that was 130 years later.
A little bit later. Okay.
So before we go on anymore, I'm just wondering. So this was the week. This was the week that I think has forever changed. I don't know, maybe the relationship of the people to American politics, maybe American politics, maybe everything. I just think it was such a momentous week. It was sort of a quantum jump away from democracy. I feel different. I just feel different. That's all I know. And I feel like, and I feel like everybody I talk to feels different. They feel like something palpably changed. So I like that we're talking about just foundational questions and
what happens to the Republican Party now?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great question.
Why are the Republicans who they are? How did they become who they are today? What was the beginning of this process of republicanism in this country? Yeah.
Okay, so when Jackson does this to the Democratic Party, we were a one-party system. The Federalist Party disintegrated, and in fact, most of the Federalists ended up joining the Democratic Republicans. So literally, we were having Soviet-style one-party elections for president in the early 1800s. When Jackson does his thing in 1829, renames the Democratic Republican Party, a group of Democratic Republicans split off and create the Whig Party. They were called National Republicans as a faction within the Democratic Republican Party. They create the Whig Party. And then in 1856, a new party is formed called the Republican Party. And the Republican Party was a strange coalition of Yankees. It was abolitionists and free soilers on the one side who were commoners and activists. And on the other side, it was bankers and industrialists, big money. And so the Republican Party was literally born as a big money party. And
Wait, Democratic Party.
no, the Republican Party was a big money party.
Okay.
It was born that way, but it also had this abolitionist,
Okay.
and it also had the birth of a suffragist movement in the mix, because a lot of the abolitionists also wanted women to have the right to vote. And it's worth remembering that when the Constitution was ratified, 5 states gave women the right to vote. They actually lost the right to vote in those 5 states. So this was a struggle to restore the right to vote for women. Like the idea that there's this progress that always goes in one direction in the United States is very
Or
illusional.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't the idea that a man would get 2 votes if the woman could, if his wife?
Yeah.
I mean,
or his wife could cancel his vote.
right. But
That was the
that's-
argument.
That's
You
rare.
don't want
That's
your
more
wife
rare.
canceling your vote.
I think that's much rarer back then, anyway.
I don't know. Women tend to care about things like healthcare and education, and men tend to be more authoritarian. And
Back then, I don't think a woman would have ever voted against her husband's wishes. It was a totally different. I mean, I know.
so I think that's a myth. I think that women
Yeah.
were way more
Yeah, I don't
assertive.
know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know some white women in Georgetown, Texas, who the biggest fight she ever got into was when she told her husband she voted for a Democrat. They
So
didn't speak
that's
for a week.
today. I actually think women are much more cowed today than they were in the 19th century.
Oh yeah. Okay,
yeah.
that's a good point. That's a good point. Oh, I hear that.
I mean, between Christian fundamentalism, which is probably 30% of the U.S. population, we never had 30% of the United States population that was fundamentalist Christian. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it was strangely enough, the post World War II, the man being able to bring home all the bacon, the woman sitting at home with her washing machine, twiddling her thumbs, that took the power out of the larynx of the women.
That's true, because women were working class in
Yeah.
the 19th century.
Before that, the woman's like, bitch, I'm bringing home the money too.
So it all comes back to labor, right? Like as soon as you have,
Absolutely.
as soon as the woman is no longer working outside of the household, and you have labor-saving technologies like dishwashers, things like this, all of a sudden women's labor doesn't matter in the same way, except for a certain kind of labor, right? Reproductive labor. They still have to push out babies and do that, and that's where the value, the societal contribution, all of that comes from. And then we can have, you know, a women's sphere and a men's sphere, public and private, and do all that stuff in a different kind of
Just
way.
like the Athenians.
It's so disheartening to find out that they were so anti-woman. I mean, I think I told you guys I was raised until I was about 12 believing in the Greek gods. I mean, that was the only religion I'd ever learned. And
That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know from Jesus.
Yeah, I mean,
was
that
all
sounds
about-
awesome to me.
Well, I mean, and then you grow up
No.
and you're like, what do you mean they died? What do you mean it's over?
Where are they? Where's
They
Zeus?
take them somewhere.
Speaking of Greek gods, our next mission to the moon is going to be called Artemis. It's really interesting that Apollo was the original mission to the moon, and that's the god of the sun, but he had a penis. And the goddess of the moon is only just now going to go to the moon. That's the level of our
You
sexism.
wanted to send out the man first to make sure it wasn't radioactive.
Right. That must be it. That's the explanation.
That's
yeah,
it.
for sure.
Absolutely.
100%. I'm sure that's true.
So okay, so what happens now with the Democratic Party? Because although they won all 3 houses, I think there's a majority of us, I hope it's a majority, who think that I'm already pissed off at Biden. I mean, he just threw Katie Porter off the economics team. You know, I don't understand the point of that. That woman can whip out a whiteboard at any moment. Tell you exactly why you shouldn't do
So
that.
amazing.
I know, right? So I just wonder, I mean, what happens to us? Do we continue to move further left, or does everybody say, oh, we're in the middle, we're fine?
Okay, so let me tell you a story.
Wait,
What?
are we continuing with that other story?
I'm going back to it.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. So in 1860, as you all know, Lincoln comes out of nowhere, defeats the Democratic Party. The Whigs don't even register at this point, and the Republican Party becomes the first third party to ever defeat one of the two main parties in the United States, and the only one. Well, we end up in a period of time where there's rampant corruption. Like U.S. Grant is a terrible president. He was corrupt. He was incompetent. And then we have a botched election that we talked about before in 1876. And then something crazy happens. In 1890, we enter into the Depression. So Americans are really sloppy when they call the Great Depression the Depression. The Depression was 1890. The Great Depression was 1929. They were 40 years apart. There were two separate events. That's why one of them has the adjective in there, because you need to modify the fact that it's not the Depression. In 1892, Grover Cleveland, a Democrat, runs for presidency for a third time. He had actually won the two previous elections, but the second election, he lost the Electoral College. And so Benjamin Harrison was the president. So he's running against Benjamin Harrison for the second time. And he does it, cobbling together a coalition of liberals and socialists and evangelical Christians. You want me to put that list together again?
Yeah, please do.
It's crazy, right? 1892, the Democratic Party puts together a coalition of liberals, socialists, and evangelical Christians, and he wins a third election, popular vote, second election, Electoral College, and it's why we count him twice. So Biden, when he becomes president, will be the 45th person, but he'll be the 46th president because Grover Cleveland got two separate terms.
Okay.
He immediately jettisons all the campaign promises he had made to the evangelicals, the socialists, and the liberals. He completely dumps them, betrays them, backstabs them, full on, and turns around and backs up the Republicans he had run against, and basically becomes another Republican president. And then
does that happen?
And he ends up ushering in an age of a whole new wave of Republicans. The United States in 1876 voted for Tilden instead of Hayes because we were so sick of the Republicans and their corruption and their incompetence. And then the botched election puts Hayes in, even though he lost. And then we elect Grover Cleveland in 1892 to finally clean out the Republicans, and he backstabs everyone and keeps the Republicans in power. And so there's a serious threat that when you elect a president, he won't follow through. He will betray you. And Grover Cleveland needs to be in everybody's mind. There's a reason he's not on our money.
Yeah. Dang.
Up to that point, republicanism still meant, let me get closer. Up to that point, republicanism still meant backing property, but also the abolitionists.
But abolition has already happened. So now it's just suffrage. There's a little bit of a suffragist movement in the Republican Party.
Okay.
And then 1900, by accident, Theodore Roosevelt becomes president. It's by accident because he was made vice president for William McKinley as a career-ending event, right? Vice presidents don't become presidents. It's just a rule in the United States. Biden is the exception to the rule. But also Biden, had a 4-year break. So maybe that was part of how
for Dan Quayle to come out and win.
Yeah.
Jeb, it's all about Jeb.
Poor Jeb. Remember that speech where he's like, really? Come on, people.
Please clap.
Please. They're like, whatever. I want to go vote for Trump. You paid me to be in this audience.
He was so sad.
I know.
Oh, maybe it's time to drop out. All right, so Roosevelt tears the lid off of everything. He goes after big business. He shreds big business. he completely betrays the Republican Party. Republican Party's freaking out. And then he only does 2 terms. They replace him with Taft, who's just another run-of-the-mill Republican. And Roosevelt's so angry about this because he had thought he had transformed the Republican Party. He runs against Taft and ends up getting Woodrow Wilson to win, a Democrat, because he splits the Republican Party. He actually got second place. The Bull Moose Party did better than the Republican Party in the 1912 election. Wilson comes in, KKK Wilson, and he fills the cabinet with Southern KKK members, and he does everything he can to normalize the KKK. And you have to remember, Jim Crow didn't go into full effect until 1901. Right? Like, I think everybody thinks Jim Crow is a 19th century phenomenon. It's really a 20th century phenomenon. It's most of Jim Crow was in the 20th century. Jim Crow wasn't even fully in place until the 20th century. I think it's a way of making ourselves feel better by making it something that took place in the very distant past.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would think that's true.
It also interrupts that idea of like linear progress again, right? For us.
Exactly. So here's a question. I have a question for y'all. When did Texas fully become a red state? What year?
Okay, so when you say fully, what does that mean? That we've never had that between the time we had a blue governor and now? Because I would say 1990.
And Richards, right?
Right after Ann Richards.
So Richards was defeated by Bush in 94, which is mind-boggling.
That was all Clayton Williams' fault, quite frankly. When he likened rape to the weather, that was bad.
But that's why she won.
Well, actually, this is what I think happened. There was a big, they were on a panel, and she got up to shake his hand, and he said, "I don't shake hands with liars." And that pissed Bubba off. You don't talk to a lady like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, then in 94, it was gun control that gave George Bush the win, right?
Yep.
Okay, but it wasn't 94. 94, only the governor was Republican. The lieutenant governor was a Democrat. The Democrats owned the Texas Senate. The Democrats owned the Texas House. So what year was it when all the elected executive positions were Republicans, including the governor and the lieutenant governor, and the Senate and the House?
2000.
You're close.
2004?
2001.
2002. 2002. So we have been a red state for 19 years.
Time we switched that.
But everyone thinks when God made Texas 5,000 years ago that he made it a Republican state. Like, it has been a conservative Republican state for 5,000 years.
No.
And the answer is it's 19 years. So here's what happened. In 1960, well, really you should do 1954. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, right? And then there's a series of lawsuits that civil rights leaders win. Browder v. I'm having a COVID brain moment. 1956, Browder v. Anyway, the bus desegregation decision, right? So there's a series of these decisions, and then it leads us to Civil Rights Act, 1964, LBJ, a segregationist, conservative, Democratic president signs into law the Civil Rights Act.
Is it Browder v. Gale?
That's it. So crazy event, right?
Yeah.
The Republican candidate for president, Barry Goldwater, runs a completely insane, upside down political campaign. And the way you know it's so upside down is because of the results. Not only is he badly defeated, it's like the third biggest or fourth biggest defeat in US presidential election history. Not only is he badly defeated, he doesn't win any northern states, and he only wins one southern state. The United States, the parties were regional. So we had 1.67 parties. We didn't have two parties. We had the Democratic Party, which competed in the North, the South, and the West. And then we had the Republican Party, which competed in the North and the West and had zero functioning presence in the South. So the South was like Soviet-style election. The Democrat was going to win in November. Done. There's no two ways about it, right? And all of a sudden, in 1964, Barry Goldwater wins 6 states. Arizona, his home state, the only Western state he wins. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina.
You don't say.
He wins the 5 Deep South states. The Deep South voted for Lincoln's party. And what Barry Goldwater, as a fascist, he was totally a full-on fascist. He was our first fascist candidate for president. What Barry Goldwater said was, if you elect me, I will get rid of the Civil Rights Act. That will be my first duty. And that's the moment when the Republican Party re-envisioned itself, not as a Yankee and Western party, but as a party that needed to go after the South and get those conservative Democrats. And Nixon doesn't really pull it off. I mean, he does to a degree, but he's not really the mastermind. It's Reagan. Reagan gets up in front of the country and says, the Democratic Party is the liberal party and the Republican Party is the conservative party. And all of a sudden, Bubba turns to Karen and said, I don't know how this happened, Karen, but I'm in the wrong party.
I need to speak to your manager.
Yeah.
So in 1998, one of the best pieces of political science ever came out. It was Abramovitz and Saunders. Alan Abramovitz asked a very interesting, beautiful, lovely, amazing question in 1998. Why are white conservative Southern Democrats switching to the Republican Party? And here's the data he did. Here's the study he did. He compared it to the percentage of Black people living in the county, and then looked at the number of white people switching to the Republican Party. And he did it for the whole South, including Oklahoma and Missouri, for those of you who are confused about whether or not Oklahoma and Missouri are in the South. And in every single county in the South, and Delaware and Maryland too, just so we're clear, in every single county in the South where there was a large Black percentage, there was mass defection of white conservatives to the Republican Party, with one regional exception, West Texas. In West Texas, there was a small Black presence, but there was a large white conversion rate, which is nice that there was that exception, right? Because then you can look to it and go, oh, thank God that we're not measuring the same thing, right? You need the exception to prove the rule, and there it is. In the rest of the South, if there was a large Black population, I think the way I remember it was 15 or 20%, to over 50%, then you were going to flip parties. Otherwise, you'd stay a Democrat.
So what happened in Oklahoma? I mean, all of it, they had the Black Wall Street. I mean, was that
Well, they burnt it to the ground in 1920.
So it was after that then that they went in and saw that Blacks were actually being successful.
Yeah, the motto for Oklahoma and Kansas used to be the center of American socialism. The motto for Oklahoma is labor shall prevail. The Republicans are still trying to figure out how to change Oklahoma's motto. They're horrified. What do you mean labor shall prevail?
Do you think that this is kind of a little off topic? Do you think that Trump is going to issue a blanket pardon to these people, these insurrectionists who flew?
I don't think he will. I think he's worried about getting hit with an obstruction of justice charge. He's already facing so many legal actions. He just doesn't need another one. And I think at this point it would be obstruction.
All right. So the story that you just told, are we done with it first of all?
Well, so the question is why? Why are white Southerners switching to the Republican Party? And here's the answer: because there was no functioning Republican Party in the South. It was an empty shell. And so if you were a white Democrat in the South, and Black people, you have to remember, flipped from basically 1933 until somewhere in the early 70s. It took about 4 decades, but the Black population in the South went from being Republicans to Democrats. So you're a white candidate in the Democratic Party. You're having to deal with that large Black population. You either have to engage it and say, yeah, I will distribute resources to your community as well to try and win the primary, or you have to get up there and be as flamboyantly racist as possible so that you can solidify your core group of voters. And it looked ugly because the Democratic candidates for office were dropping the N-word all over the place so that they could make sure everybody understood who they were. Yeah. And so saying the N-word had become taboo. So what do if you can't say the N-word? Become a Republican. It's a completely empty shell. There's no black population in the Republican Party. And now you don't have to drop the N-word. Everybody knows that you're a racist because you're a Republican in the South.
Exactly.
And Trump figured this out. His opening salvo in 2016 is Mexicans are rapists and murderers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And right. he overtly is racist. Shithole countries. He figured it out. He knew the formula was to do what white Democratic candidates had been doing.
Not to mention Muslims are sleeper cells. Yeah. At best, sleeper cell terrorists that need to be put in concentration camps. He doesn't use the word concentration, but camps.
Yeah. So in this moment, what we're seeing is that white population feels like they failed. They've lost control.
Speaking of Muslims, is that why 2002 was the date? The reason, I guess, is it comes right after 9/11, right?
So that probably played a role. But the real reason that Texas flipped was the Republicans had gerrymandered state so severely. They used in Texas, the legislature is supposed to draw the maps. Well, the Texas House still belonged to the Democrats. The Senate belonged to Republicans. As long as they're willing to compromise and make a single map, they can send that to the governor and the governor signs it into law. And the Republicans simply refuse to play ball. And when that happens, it then goes to 5 executives. One was a Democrat, 4 Republicans, and the Republicans just drew the map the way they wanted to. And they gerrymandered that.
So ridiculous. I'm in 78704 and I'm being represented by Brazos County.
Good for you.
So
Austin has no district. No home district.
So here's my question. Given what happened last week, how can we relate the story that you just told to explaining where the hell we are right now?
So what Trump has successfully done then is he said, look, you're an aggrieved white voter. You don't want to share your resources with black and brown people, with Muslims. Follow me and I'll make America great again. And then when he failed, right? Because he didn't actually do anything. He built 200 miles of wall on a 2,000-mile long border. Obama built more wall than Trump did.
Damn right.
Obama deported more undocumented immigrants than Trump did. And then he's defeated in the election. They don't know what to do because the writing is on the wall. The numbers are against them. It's going the wrong direction. The United States was 60.5% white when Trump was elected. It's 59% white now. I mean, that's a remarkable transformation for a 4-year period of time. And
white people aren't having babies right now.
That's why white people have a negative population growth in the United States, whereas everybody else is making babies. So, so at the end of the day, United States, again, it just boils down to racism and race and genocide and ethnic cleansing.
Do you really think that's unique to the United States?
I mean, South Africa made its attempt. The British and the French do ugly shit. But the United States has it on the Chinese, the Indians are doing ugly shit. India has a capacity for 1 million people in concentration camps. And China has put 1 million people in concentration camps. Yeah, we're not alone.
This question
shitheads of the world unite.
Yeah, this question actually comes up a lot, as in, just human beings are sort of built close-minded and tribal and all of that. And that's I think that's right on. The difference in my eyes has always been, especially as an immigrant, is the following. I came here with an understanding, with a sort of promise in my mind. And I was naive. I was a kid. I didn't know much about American politics, history. I knew more than most, but still. But the promise of this place, the reason why it's different, the reason why it says it's different, the reason why it claims it is different is because it's supposed to be different. It's supposed to be a place where other tribes come to coexist, to cohabitate. That is the premise of this congregation, of coming together. Now, it's based on genocide. It's based on enslavement. It's based on all sorts of shit. But at least there is, there is the structurally it is built to on a vision that's different than any other place. Perhaps maybe Canada is different, but Canada wasn't necessarily built on that vision.
Right.
So yeah.
So it's 'cause we
Yeah. I wanna I feel a certain kind of way when we say that like human beings have this sort of inherent conservative tribal mindsets, and I think that we do. I also think that we have the capacity to sort of like think across those. I think that the reason we're seeing so much genocidal tendencies, concentration camp tendencies, these things in China and India and the United States is in part to do with like the nation state. A nation state is, it sort of ends up implying that it's an ethnic nation state, that there's one group of people for whom this nation was built, for whom the state exists, and that group of people will be sort of primal, or the first citizens, or the intended citizens, or something like that. And everyone else is sort of subordinate in that kind of system. I feel like, if we look throughout history, like large land-based empires deal with diversity in different kinds of ways and are able to encounter that in a different way than single nation states are.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh. Thanks for complicating that. Yeah, I think the introduction of the nation state as a category was really important.
Like fascism is baked into that.
Yeah. Although even prior to nation states, we did have a hierarchy of tribalism. So, so the tendency for domination has been there, but yeah.
But like I see, when I look at India, for example, in sort of historic India, I see hierarchies, yes. I see tribalism as heck, yes. And I see the existence of multiple sort of nations on top of each other and amongst each other in sort of common space. But like when India becomes a nation state, all of a sudden from the very beginning, I see this inevitable push towards like homogenization of a whole big class of those into one nation state group, and then the others or the rest. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about. So yes, I did see like hierarchy before. I saw tons of tribalism, tons of sort of exclusion, inclusion, lots of in-groups and out-groups, but there were lots of them and there were pluralities of them.
And it was regional too. It was regional and patchy, and yeah.
And I also think it's worth throwing in that there were two types of empires, because you brought up the empire. There were the tolerant empires and the intolerant empires. And, so Persia was a tolerant empire, and they embraced and celebrated diversity. But at the end of the day, the Persians were at the top of the food chain. But nonetheless, they still celebrated diversity. The Arab Empire, for its short-lived 2 centuries, did the same thing. But the Roman Empire was genocidal, vicious, cruel. And if you didn't conform, they wiped you out, like the Dacians. Right? Nobody knows where Dacia is today because the Romans were so thorough.
And also Persians for a relatively short period of time. It wasn't like all the way into Sasanians or anything. No.
But in part because of their conflict with the Romans. You had a tolerant empire and an intolerant empire, and they kept clashing, and eventually the tolerant empire became intolerant.
Yeah, I don't know how that worked out, but yeah.
It's a good response mechanism when you're in distress.
Yeah.
if you can't beat them.
If you can't beat them, kill them.
So I'm wondering if we can focus on what happened last weekend, because this is a news show. We got to keep focusing on what happened in the news. But yeah.
So one of the things I want to talk about is the cops. The cops letting them in and helping them, and apparently there are members of Congress who
the reconnaissance
help them do reconnaissance. I mean.
So when in our history have we ever had something like this, where our there are actual people within our government trying to bring it down from the inside.
I have an answer.
Give it to me.
Okay, so this is going to sound crazy, but this is actually our second coup attempt. Really, it's our third, because really 1824 was a coup, right? Andrew Jackson won that election. It was stolen from him, given to John Quincy Adams. And then 1876 was also a coup, because Tilden really won that election, and it was given to Hayes through cheating. Okay, so this is our fourth coup attempt. In 1932, when FDR was elected president, a group of Republicans and a group of businessmen got together and actually attempted to launch a coup d'etat. They decided that the way to do it was to get the Marine Corps involved. And they were going to actually have the Marine Corps be the functioning military element to make the coup work. So they approached Major General Smedley Butler, United States Marine Corps, and they told them their plan. So the plan was that they were going to make all the policy decisions. They were going to tell them to Butler, and then Butler was going to deliver them to FDR, and FDR was going to become their puppet, so that the Republican Party and those business leaders would still run the United States. It's just they would have a Democratic puppet. Smedley Butler said, I'm your man. Let's do this. And so they gave him the thing that he was going to read to FDR, explaining that if he didn't comply, the Marine Corps was going to take him out. And he took the thing and he went to the wrong address. Apparently, Smedley Butler wasn't really good with maps. This is before GPS, obviously. It's 1932. He goes to the wrong
landscaping.
Yeah, he went to the wrong building. He goes to the Capitol and he says, I'd like to address the House and the Senate.
Oops.
Now, normally you can't just do that, right? But Smedley Butler is one of only 2 human beings to win 2 Congressional Medals of Honor while still being alive.
Wow.
Usually, like 90% of Congressional Medal of Honor winners get it posthumously, and he had 2. So he goes up and he says, I want to address both houses of Congress. They're like, yeah, you're like a miracle. Who the hell are you? If you ever meet a Marine and you want them to cry, say Smedley Butler, Chesty Puller, and James Mattis, 3 in a row. Those are their gods. They worship them, and they will immediately begin to weep from joy. And they're right for doing so. All 3 men are superhumans. Just
Smedley and Chesty.
Chesty, Smedley, and James.
Okay, I have my names for my next animals.
Yes.
Yeah, these are like dwarf names.
That might be
No, it's
sacrilege.
Smedley and
Smedley.
Chesty. I can't wait to introduce.
I'm feeling
my
really
Marine
weird
friends.
right now.
Smed- yeah. Smedley makes me want to go like this. I'm Smedley. Am I right?
After I tell you what he does, let's see if you still feel that way.
Okay.
Both houses of Congress meet, and he reads the coup letter to them.
Oh my God.
And that's why there was no coup.
Wow.
Dang.
And then he turned around and wrote a book called War is a Racket. And he said, in all my years as a general, I never once promoted democracy, defended democracy, or defended the United States. I was nothing more than a thug, his word, for big business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I worship Smedley Butler, just for the record.
Wow. So he was going after the people that go like,
Yes.
He was the anti-Smedley.
And here's the
yeah,
best
there
part.
you go.
None of the coup leaders were ever arrested or charged with it.
No.
Not even
They
then.
were respectable folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
They were
even
white,
then.
right? They were
Not
white.
even then. And Butler was furious. He was like, really? You're just leaving these guys? They tried to do a coup. What's wrong with you? And Congress is
Don't
like,
you think
well-
that's what's going to happen, though? I mean, here, don't you think?
Yeah.
I
Congress
think
are
that
gonna
will
get
happen
free?
if the American people let it happen. I think if the American people punish politicians, and you can punish them all sorts of ways. You can vote them out of office, which we don't do, right? 95% incumbency re-election rate in this country.
Yeah.
You can protest. Don't do insurrections, but protest.
Only though, that's the
Like, don't try to
question.
kill Pence.
Right, but are they going to even allow peaceful protests at certain buildings now because of what
This is a
happened.
great
They have state
opportunity
and
to
local
talk about it.
offices. Mhm.
Yep.
They have
Um,
homes and addresses.
they can be doxxed just like we can.
And we can do COVID safe protests, right? We can drive around their house, drive around the
That's
block,
true.
honk,
Around the block.
all that
With
stuff.
a bullhorn that says
Mhm.
Black Lives Matter just on a loop.
So we
Mhm.
do have a First Amendment right to peacefully assemble, right? And we also have
Yes.
First Amendment to freedom, right to freedom of speech. The problem is during the Occupy Wall Street uprising, that spring, so the following spring, so spring of 2012, Congress, and you have to remember that the House was owned by the Republicans, but the Senate was owned by the Democrats.
Mm.
They wrote a bill that limited the ability of protest, of freedom of press at protests when the cops decide to bust a protest. And you have to remember, Democratic President Barack Obama signed that law, and so
Yeah.
our rights to protest are severely curtailed.
Yeah.
Well,
Already.
They will continue to be if we turn around from this and try to expand this category of terrorism domestically, regulate speech in that particular kind of way too.
Yeah, for sure.
This could be really ugly for the democracy.
Yeah. It's like a Patriot Act 2 or something coming. I don't know. We'll have to see. But
Patriot Act 3.
3.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
didn't pass. Patriot Act 2 didn't pass, but then they chopped it up into little pieces and they attached it as
Piecemealed it
riders to other legislation.
It passed.
Yeah, parts of it passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do
Parts
you
of it-
remember when Trump first took over, he was going to shut down Lafayette Square completely, and now I guess he got his wish. I mean, you silence the people, you don't have anybody to rail against, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, did anyone else notice that when he said, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, I don't know why he uses this forceful way of speaking sometimes, because it's just like, oh my God, quit yelling at me. Capitol.
Have you noticed that his voters, when they do a post on Facebook or send you a text, it's all in caps?
All caps.
They're always shouting.
It's
Uh-huh.
a nervous system issue.
Yeah, I think Ativan, lorazepam, clonazepam, they need something. Xanax.
I'm doing the Xanax.
We put it in the water supply.
It's like my advantages are being taken away from me.
Yeah.
A nervous system is on
it's a sense
fire.
of urgency. You have to act now.
Under
You have to do
attack,
this
yes,
immediately
urgency.
for
Under attack,
you know.
under attack. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, it's a constant barrage of some kind of, I mean, for some of us, I think it's legitimate. We're afraid of our rights, like freedom of
Yeah.
speech and stuff like that. But a lot of these,
change.
most of these white people are, just like you said, oh my God, I'm going to have to share. What? No.
So I've been an activist for 3 decades. I started in 90. So what is that? 31 years. And 5 years ago or so, a bunch of my conservative friends that I no longer have because Trump destroyed that possibility, were like, oh, things need to change. And I'm like, yeah, I totally agree. I've been protesting for decades for change. But what do you see now that needs changing? I was totally suspect, of course. And they would say, well, don't you think something needs to change? And I'm like, yes, I do. But what do you think needs to change? And they would go, well, something needs to happen. And I go,
Oh my
great.
God.
Why? What is the thing you're complaining about? And they would go, something needs changing. Yeah. Could you pin it down? Like, what is it exactly that's freaked you out? What is it at this moment? And of course they can't say it, because if they say it, what they're doing is they're admitting that it's the privilege that they're losing. And I don't even know if their brain could articulate it, right? It was too horrific to admit to.
Just listen to Lee Atwater's speech about his quiet speech about what the evolution of the word, the N word, and where it started and why you can't say it anymore. It was with Nixon. And he was saying that's how we win the vote, is we just, we continue to pander and hopefully get their vote. Because Nixon was a civil rights dude. I mean, didn't he sign something? civil rightsy?
I'm unaware of him signing anything, but I'm sure there might have been something. He definitely did interesting things like
The climate, something about the climate, right?
EPA. He's the guy who created the
Yeah.
EPA. And earned income credit for your taxes. That was him. He actually did some interesting things that I think most people would think are liberal. He was definitely not a full-fledged conservative, but then he also did some really crazy authoritarian stuff. So
Odd that Trump doesn't want to be compared to him, especially.
he had to resign.
Well, but
So he's a loser. He's like a dead soul.
He's a loser.
Roger
Yeah.
Stone,
Loser.
though, I mean, he's in love with that guy, and they're very good friends. I just would have assumed that that would have been fine with him, you know. But you're right, he did resign. But still, he's telling people they can't even say Nixon in the White. Can't say it in front of him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he's a loser. In Trump's world, there's losers and winners.
A tremendous loser.
There's nothing in between.
Tremendous.
So what's he now?
Tremendously.
What was that?
Yeah.
What's he now? He's a bigly tremendous loser.
Not in his eyes, right? Not in his eyes. In his eyes, he got cheated. So that's different. So you get to whine, like kind of like the country's been doing to people that are white folks that are entitled, babying them the whole time. So this comes back to the all caps, right? They're just crying, "Wow, temper tantrum." Yeah. So that's what he's doing.
Which
Yeah.
brings us to a question that came up in last week's show about what happens now if he gets impeached twice. So if he gets removed, so in Texas, if you're removed from office, you're actually found guilty. You're impeached and then found guilty. You cannot run for office again. That actually happened to Governor Ferguson. He was impeached, removed from office. So his wife ran, Miriam Ferguson, and she became known as Governor Ma Ferguson.
Ugh.
And that's how he got back in, except it turned out she had her own ideas. And
Yep.
he didn't really get back in, and she became an actual governor. Making Ann Richards our second woman governor. But in the United States, there is no such thing. What there is that the Senate, when they convict, can then determine what the punishment is. And if they do decide, they can ban him from running for office again. They could take away his executive privileges. They could take away the SS.
Yeah.
They
Secret Service can go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen.
Remember when he threatened Hillary with that?
Yeah, he was going to put her in prison.
Yeah.
Lock her
We're
out.
Secret Service.
Yeah.
So, but if the 14th Amendment gets pulled on him, then he automatically loses all that stuff.
14th Amendment?
Yeah, because he would be found to have, the 14th Amendment was created after the Civil War to say that you can't do this. You can't do insurrections and sedition and try to break parts of the United States off. You will be punished. Can
that be enacted after he's out of office?
Yes.
Can they still go back to the? Okay.
It's a simple majority vote in both houses. It's so much easier than impeachment.
Okay.
They would
And
just
Pelosi can sit on those
I
articles
mean,
for
at this point, Mitch McConnell has come and said, as of Friday that I listened to the news, he is not in public, but behind closed doors saying that
New York Times said this.
said it.
Yeah.
He is
I
now
saw
saying that good riddance, basically, we are ready to close this chapter. Like they are done. They were done with Trump before. They had to play this. They had to perform this whole last 4 years of whatever performance they did. And now he's like, they are ready to close this chapter.
But
They
he
are ready to
wouldn't
go
vote to
back to
convict.
business as usual with the Republican Party.
Do you think he would vote to convict though? Because I don't. If
Yeah,
he
I
was-
think in the
He
name
said
of
he might.
bipartisanship, in the name of not inflaming.
think he's
debate,
saying-
all that stuff.
Yeah, I think he's saying he might just to scare Trump from inciting anything
Mhm.
more for the inauguration.
The question is what happens in the primaries? If Mitch is defeated by a pro-Trump, if Mitch is defeated by a pro-Trump Republican in the primaries, right? That's his only concern. That's the only concern of any of these Republicans. This is why they were going to be so loyal to Trump no matter what happened.
I don't know. It was really like Cheney's daughter was really interesting to me. Like she basically shot herself, at least in the leg.
Yeah. She
I
jumped
don't
out there real quick, right?
And she did right away.
She was pretty clear. Which makes me think, given the Machiavellian business going on in that family. What are they brewing? Like, I'm just wondering what's going
The Cheney, I know. Yeah, the Cheneys. Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think war's coming. Something. I don't know. I just
me
have
too.
this weird
That's always a
sense.
good bet.
Yeah. It freaks me out. Keeps me up at night. I'm like, man, we're gonna get into some kind of war. So maybe she's part of that, being in that to push something somewhere.
All right. So I don't know. Can you guys see this? You can't see this.
No,
Oh, wait.
Oh, sort of.
Oh.
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Trump's popularity right now, his approval rating.
What is it?
The 58 or the 40?
So I'm going to give you the number too. So he's got 58.4% disapproval, 38% approval.
That's 10. That's a 10 jump.
It's a 7-point jump from his
Trump.
April 1st high. His high, he achieved the high 4 times right around April 1st. I think but on April 1st, he did also achieve that high. He's about 7 points lower, which is really remarkable. You can kill 380,000 people, right? We're at 405,000, but the evidence is that only the first 20,000 were avoidable. Everything after were unavoidable. Everything afterwards was totally avoidable. So he killed 380,000 people, led an insurrection. He still got 38% approval, but it is still a plunge. He's definitely dropped. I want to talk to that 7%. Like, what the dude told you from the beginning, he was never going to go along with any election result that didn't give him a win. So, like, you're shocked that he tried to do an insurrection, or have you not been listening to him? There it is.
Wow. There it is. Okay. Yeah, exactly. It's like, have you guys been hiding this whole time? How can you say that you didn't see this? I mean, it's like,
Go over to April 1st, 2020. That was his non-inauguration high. It was 45.8.
it's odd that, do you think his high was because he wasn't wearing a mask and he was so masculine?
I think it was a Hobbesian high. I think people were panicking because they were worried they were going to die of COVID.
Yeah.
And when people panic, they rally around the sovereign. I mean, it's Thomas Hobbes, the Leviathan, right there.
Wow. Okay.
I do also think it's funny that April Fool's was one of the 4 days.
Oh my God. That is pretty, I wonder if he thought it was, well, of course he thought it was real. He didn't.
Well,
You
we
could tell
talked
him
about this
anything.
last time, right? Who are the people who are now jumping ship? The lay people who are jumping ship. And
right.
They're like, holy crap. It feels like, remember we talked to a friend and
Yeah.
they said their family member.
This is too far.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, the system's crumbling. I'm actually, I get goods from this system. He's taken it too far because like this might not come back to this might start crumbling. And then
so
what?
you're talking about McConnell, right? Talking about Mr. McConnell, or just Trump?
Or just the 7%.
anyone?
The 7%
okay.
who are switching. The lay people, yeah. Possibly McConnell too, right? I'm thinking McConnell's thinking, yeah. I mean, we can't let this beautiful system we've been working on for more than 200 years to crumble. Like we can't do
It's
it.
I mean, they desecrated the Senate chamber.
Yeah.
They should in the Senate.
Thomas, did
Sorry.
you want to say something?
No, I was just saying it's this idea of this sort of sacred republic, these sort of sacred idols, this sanctified place, all of that being desecrated, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a scene of Man in the High Tower.
Not to mention the fact that these people's lives literally came under attack.
Yeah, they were gonna lynch Pence.
They felt death nearing. The vulnerability. These people don't feel vulnerable. Nothing can touch them. All of a sudden, their lives were under attack. This is real shit.
And still under attack, right? Because like with COVID, right? Who knows how many got COVID? Because Representative Jayapal got COVID.
At least
some
3
of them
people got it.
And there were a couple of guys in there. There was a guy and a woman who refused to put them on. They were.
I saw the video of it. Somebody was videoing them going, no, laughing at the.
Ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Like Nancy Pelosi's, like her location was tweeted out by what was her name?
Boebert.
Yes. Yes. Like, I mean, so yeah, they're definitely like, oh snap. It's
And
like how
feeling
far, how
that.
much has to happen before they say, okay, yeah, this is just wrong. You know what I mean? That 7%. Yeah.
Also, why did
Apparently
the SS
more.
take so long in evacuating Pence? Like the SS literally went, is it just me or is it weird that our Secret Service has the same initials as Schutzstaffel, which was Hitler's bodyguard?
When you keep saying SS, that's what it makes you think about.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, because they were both
And
bodyguards.
it's
Yeah.
intentional. Roy Peace
Okay.
is intentional.
Okay.
It has to be a daily moral dilemma to go be the Secret Service for Donald Trump.
Okay,
be like-
so we're
But-
running out of time. I have a question going back to what you were saying, as in, where are we going? Things will be different. Folks will be held accountable. People in power will be held accountable if we hold them accountable. And here's my question. So who wasn't there at the Capitol last week were the Black Lives Matter folks, were Antifa, all the protesters, right? Nobody was there. And thank goodness for that.
I mean, that was strategic and brilliant.
Strategic and
I
brilliant.
hope they
So
skip it again too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
skip today.
yeah.
Whatever is going to happen today, don't go. And then skip
Skip
the
the
20th.
inauguration. Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
them take care of this.
Watch it on
Yeah.
TV.
But I
That's
love
for
the
real.
fact that there was coordination
Yeah.
and that
They weren't
teams
gonna
are working together. I'm loving it.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
loving
all over Twitter. Don't go. Everybody was telling everybody else just don't show up, and it was great. And I really hope that they do that again because I have a feeling this isn't over. And let them fight each other. Let them show exactly how much they care about blue lives.
Mhm,
Beat them with a
mhm.
flagpole.
Yeah.
Blue lives matter until they don't.
Yeah, until they
Yeah.
don't. Yeah.
And on
Mhm.
that note, I think we're going to have to run. This is a great discussion as usual, y'all. Thanks for everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And thanks to the hosts of this amazing show. We will be back next Sunday, and look for our podcast wherever you can find podcasts starting next week.
Let's see
Thank
how
you
the
very much.
inauguration goes.
Oh, and today
And today. Yes.
And today, y'all be safe.
I'm turning on the
Everybody-
news.
Everybody say bye.
Bye. Be safe,
Bye.
y'all.
Bye, everyone.